My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, we meet with so many people and we are able to provide them with actionable advice in our meetings. And we give what I think is good advice to them, but oftentimes they leave the meetings and they feel confident when they leave the meetings, but then they're immediately bombarded with the noise of the world, be it people around them, be it the news, and it turns into procrastination of sorts. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, we just had a couple different couples that we met with where they had met with us not that long ago, just a few months ago, and they wanted to come back in and revisit their retirement discussion. And our question is, well, has anything changed? Are there life events, goal changes, anything like that? And they're like, no, not really. The reason we're coming back is you cover so many things, keeping in mind that we're talking about all these different puzzle pieces of investing and for retirement, including Social Security and Medicare and all the transitions with health insurance and investments and all that stuff. Okay. And so we cover all these things in the meeting. And we emphasize all the time that the whole point of financial planning is to take actions that make sense or are in alignment with what you're trying to accomplish. So at the end of a meeting, we always summarize the actions we want them to take. And we tell them, you don't need to remember everything that we just talked about in this meeting. There's a lot of things that we're describing to them from a technical standpoint that we know, but they don't need to remember that. They just need to understand that there's a rhyme and a reason for the actions that we're recommending at the end of the meeting. But what happens a lot of times is people will leave. And remember, we have access to unlimited information in our world today. And that could be friends, family, social media, the internet, chat GPT. So you have AI now telling you what you can and can't do. And so these people leave. And what happened in these two instances in particular, and it happens fairly often, is instead of remembering the actions and taking proactive actions, which are the things that move you towards the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, what they did is they started to go, oh, well, how does this work again? And how does that work again? And they started to ask questions of other people or internet, and they got confused. How does this work? And how does that work? And tell me again what IRMA is. And they got bogged down in all the minutia and all the details, which are endless. I mean, they're all over the place. And half of them don't even apply to these particular couples. But what happens when you get overwhelmed with information is we tend to procrastinate. Now we don't take any actions, and so we don't move forward towards the outcomes that we desire.
So how do you avoid that? If I'm a client, I come into you and you've given me this great advice, how do I go about avoiding that scenario of getting caught up in the noise and ending up procrastinating?
I think one of the things that I do a lot in our meetings is I try to set appropriate expectations. And what I mean by that is we tell them, you don't need to remember all of this information. And also, as soon as you leave here today, you are going to be exposed to all sorts of information. And it's important for you to understand that it's these three or four or five things that we've emphasized that we want you to write down and take those actions. Now, if you run into challenges with the actions themselves, absolutely reach out and we will try to help you, work through that process. But at the same time, a lot of women in particular, they're very good at just following steps. So if we say, do this, do this, do this, they'll just make a checklist and work their way through it. A lot of times men will look at it and their inherent nature might be to question. And then they might go online, or maybe they talk to a friend or something else, and they go, well, this guy told me this. And let's just say it's Social Security, for example. And should you take it at 62 or 67, or should you wait all the way until 70? And somebody else will now say, oh, well, you shouldn't do that. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who did this, and that's what you should do. And it's like completely out of context and it doesn't make any sense for their situation. But once you get two conflicting pieces of advice, now you're inevitably going to question. You don't know which one, and so then you don't take any action.
Yeah, that gets into that analysis paralysis where, you get confused and you don't know what to do and how to move forward. Now, would you say people should try to start working on that advice immediately? Does that help to, you know, cut out some of that noise and cut out some of that procrastination?
Yeah, more often than not, our emphasis for sure is on the things that need to be done now as compared to things down the road. And we do run into some challenges with that where sometimes you're talking about a timeline. In retirement, you might retire, you might have this income stream for a period of time. For example, when we talk about bridging, where somebody might access their investments for a period of time, then they might turn on a Social Security or their pension or some other income source. And now you've given advice that might be, okay, do this now, and then maybe it's a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, here's the next thing. Well, we understand that the next thing might be confusing for them and they might not remember exactly what to do. More often than not, that's when people come back and then we revisit, okay, you took this step, this step, this step. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. And I will say that for a lot of financial advisors, they actually contribute to this problem as compared to solve this problem. Because if I produce a comprehensive retirement plan and you pay me, thousands of dollars to produce this plan, I might give you a binder with, tens or dozens or hundreds of pages or whatever it is. Sometimes these binders are that thick. And it's got a whole bunch of scenarios and information, and you can run as many spreadsheets as you want. And people look at that and they go, I don't know what this means. And so when we do this, a lot of times we're not giving them any sort of plan like that. We're giving them do this action, do this action, do this action, and it's moving you along the path. Now, when your goals change or your life changes or something happens, the path might change, the target might shift. And now you just, now you make a little turn and you're still moving in a positive direction. So focusing on actions is, in our opinion, the most critical aspect of financial planning and advice.
I agree. Especially when you mentioned about financial advisors providing this big, thick binder of information and trying to kind of make you dependent upon them for moving forward. So, what is one key takeaway you would recommend to people who are watching this?
I think for people watching this, you're watching a YouTube video and you can watch, tons of YouTube videos from financial advisors, or, you can go through AI and ask them all sorts of questions and you can get all this information. One of the biggest takeaways is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Some of those things might be outright inappropriate for your situation. And the key here is context. So, information is very different than wisdom. Wisdom means we have the experience to understand how to take the information and apply it in context with your specific circumstances. When you just have a bunch of information but no wisdom, you're now lacking common sense. And now the actions you take might be nonsensical, they don't make any sense at all, or you just don't take any actions in a positive direction.
Dan, that was such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for highlighting that difference between, wisdom and just, following the noise of the world. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And until next time, have a great day.
Thanks, Leah.
You too.